another episode of Accessibility. It's a show on YouTube where I talk about the video game industry, accessibility, and representation. Basically, how can we help more people to play games, and more people to see themselves in the games they play? Originally released back in December of 2018 as an early access title, and brought to a full release in September 2020, Hades is a fast-paced action roguelike that has quickly become one of my favourite games of the year. It is fantastic. In Hades, you play as Zagreus, son of Hades, son of the Lord of the Underworld, and all you're trying to do is escape the Underworld. You're trying to fight your way to the surface. Powerful monsters will stand in your way. Every attempt that you make to get to the surface brings you more and more story, and it's a game about cycles. It is a game about trying and getting stopped at every hurdle. It's a game about failure. It is a game about trying again when you've been defeated and going, this time's going to be different. It's a game about not letting failure stop you, and even if you win, you're going to go back to where you started and have to do it again, so just keep trying at it. And I think that's a really interesting concept narratively for a roguelike. Hades is as much a game about its plot as it is about its roguelike gameplay mechanics, and it's a game that wants you to see its ending, which, you know, it's a difficult game to start with, and it gets more difficult as you play, which is going to be a barrier for some people persevering enough to see those endings. And considering how much of this game is about its plot, I'm really thankful that the game's developers put in a way to make sure that as many people as possible can actually see how Hades finishes. With that in mind, I was incredibly excited to see the game's developer, Supergiant Games, include a difficulty mode setting in Hades called God Mode. It is an incredibly well thought out accessibility setting that will ensure Hades is completable for most players without reducing the difficulty of the actual challenges you're facing. God Mode is an example of video game difficulty done right, that rewards players for their perseverance, translating their hard work into their ability to progress. So, what actually is God Mode? Well, put simply, it's a sort of optional levelling system which can be switched on and off as you play without penalty. With God Mode switched on, anytime the player dies, they will gain a 2% buff to their defense. Nothing else about the game changes. You just take slightly less damage from enemies now. What I really like about God Mode in Hades is that it doesn't impact the rest of the way the game's progression is balanced. A lot of easy modes in games will cause enemies to not use some of their more powerful attacks, or make you so strong that enemies now fall in a couple of basic attacks. They fundamentally change the experience of the game you're having as a player, and while sometimes that's desirable, it's often not needed. By keeping all of the enemy attacks present, and keeping your damage output, you're still being presented with the standard difficulty version of the game. You're going to get better at dodging, you're going to get more practice at timing when it's safe to attack a certain boss. You're still facing the base game's challenges, you just have a better chance of coming out the other side intact. So, let's talk a little more about the specifics of how God Mode in Hades works. As stated before, God Mode in Hades gives you a 2% defense buff for each death while it's active, to an upper limit where you take 80% less damage from attacks. God Mode doesn't take into account deaths that happened before you activated God Mode, and it remembers your defense buff percentage if you switch the mode off, then back on again later. You can also switch it on and off mid-run, if there's one boss fight that you find yourself getting particularly stuck on. Let's say you can generally complete a run in Hades at its base difficulty, but the Bone Hydra boss fight kicks your ass every time. You could switch on God Mode at the start of the boss fight. If it kills you, you've gained a 2% defense boost to help you next time. If you succeed and you manage to defeat the boss, you can turn it back off again for the rest of the run. It's there to be used when you need it, and can be switched off again afterwards if you want. As you progress through Hades, the game encourages players to increase the difficulty of certain parts of the experience as they keep progressing, such as giving individual boss fights additional attacks, or more harsh terrain to fight on. The way God Mode balances out with this is really interesting to see. Players with God Mode on die over and over, making it a little further each time, until the defense boost they are receiving is high enough for them to complete the run. Then, the game asks them to make things a little harder, The player goes back to dying along their journey, but once again progressing forward a little bit more with each death. God mode never makes it so that the game has forever lost its challenge, because as soon as it has helped you complete a run, it knocks the challenge up a little higher to compensate. That's really interesting game design, as it ensures players can progress, but makes them continually try again and again to earn it. So, it should be pretty clear why I think so highly of Hades God mode. It is a way to make sure that as many players as possible can see the end of the game, without just getting rid of what the game is about, this idea of perseverance, sticking with it and fighting through. Those are really important narrative themes, and I'm glad that this approach to difficulty keeps those intact while making the game completable. But I think to really understand why I think this is such a good difficulty mode in terms of accessibility, we need to contrast it with another very difficult game that technically you could progression your way through if you persevered, but that is not nearly as accessible. Let's compare Hades God mode to leveling in Dark Souls. On paper, Dark Souls is also a game where, theoretically, you can eventually get through a series of very difficult challenges by sheer perseverance. When you defeat enemies, you get souls. You can spend those souls on leveling up attributes of your character, and you could, in theory, simply fight manageable monsters eternally to level up your defensive stats until you were strong enough to progress. However, there's a few key differences between Dark Souls and Hades that make the latter much more viable to complete this way. In Hades, God mode allows players to gain a set boost to their defense every single time they die. Progression is not predicated on how well you did on that run, but instead on the fact that you gave it your best shot. You can play risky, you can aim for tough bosses, you can try your best to progress and succeed and to do better. On each attempt, you know that you're going to be rewarded for that attempt. In Dark Souls, the amount of work you need to do to increase your defense isn't a linear path. Early on in the game, the number of souls needed to level up a stat is pretty small, but the amount needed increases the more times you level up. This means that you'd need to level grind for longer and longer periods of time to see that defense boost. Additionally, because you need to actually defeat enemies to gain experience, you're incentivized to fight enemies you know you can defeat repeatedly, rather than risk time on fights that may not pan out for you. Fighting the same fights over and over isn't fun, and it's certainly not equivalent to a straight defense increase upon every death. Hades' approach to difficulty rewards perseverance, and steadily helps players progress towards victory over time. It doesn't do away with the need to play the game repeatedly to see the story, which is integral to the plot, and it doesn't make it so easy that you're likely to beat the game on your first attempt. Hades is a game designed to be played tens of times in a row. You'll miss huge amounts of the game's plot if you complete it too quickly. God mode maintains this structure. It maintains the fighting past adversity through repeated failure that is a plot motif and a mechanical motif, and it keeps that intact. It just allows players to know that each attempt will be a little easier than the last. Zagreus, the main character, is getting stronger the more times he attempts to escape the underworld, and so are you, the player. It's an incredibly smart implementation of difficulty. Roguelikes as a genre are typically built so that most of your runs are going to be failures. You are going to get knocked back time and time again, and usually they don't offer a lot that will help you eventually work towards success other than get good. Considering Hades is so much about its plot, and so much of its plot is about getting better, getting further, doing better every time, I think that God mode is a wonderful way to keep the game's themes intact mechanically while letting people progress. I wish more games were thoughtful like this about difficulty. It isn't just a simple easy mode. This isn't just knocking the difficulty down a bunch all at once and you have a fundamentally different experience. This is, every time you die, okay, you died. We'll just make it a little bit easier next time, a little bit easier. Oh, you succeeded? We got the difficulty right. That's cool. Let's make it more difficult for you so that we can keep that balance going. Once again, you're going to be slightly overpowered. You're going to build your way up to this next challenge. And I think that is so That is so interesting. It is such a cool way to do difficulty. For all of the talk I have seen over the years about the idea of a potential Dark Souls easy mode, I think God mode in Hades is a really good blueprint of how you could do something like this. Every time that you make an attempt, whether it's successful or not, things are going to get a little bit easier. If you persevere enough, you can eventually overcome these problems. You can see the richly crafted world you might be invested in. You can find out what the rest of the plot is. You're not going to find yourself getting halfway through a game and going, I love everything about this, I just can't complete it. And then go, oh, well, I don't really want to have to knock the whole difficulty down. It's just this one bit I'm stuck on. It's just gradual buffs that let people persevere and see what's next. And I really think this is a way that we could... I wish we could see more games implement difficulty like this in future. It really is quite a wonderful execution.